How long should I let it go for?
Whole thing. No, I'm kidding.
All right. Welcome to Zen Pop Parenting. I can't,
You
I
can't
can't,
turn it off.
I can't do the applause. I can't turn the applause off and the music at the same time. I either need to dull it out.
Oh,
It's a production thing.
it's a production thing.
Welcome back to another episode of Zen Pop Parenting. What's our tagline or the closest thing you can think of what our tagline is, sweetie?
Where Gen X pop culture meets real life reflection.
Boom. And this episode is titled Fell on Black Days, the deaths of 90s lead singers and what it teaches us about mental health and addictions. So,
I just told Todd that I have like 9 pages in front of me of things I've like either printed off or written or just there's so much in this
much.
and because it is Gen X pop culture and Todd and I obviously lived through this and have our own personal experiences and a lot happened. And I think where I know that this has been discussed, throughout anybody who discusses pop culture has discussed the 90s and grunge, but there's so much when it comes to what happened to our lead singers.
Yes.
Like it's when you really put it all together, which we're doing today, it's kind of unbelievable.
Should we start? So, we're going to set the scene. Are we ready to set the scene?
We are ready to set the scene.
So, should we? I think a good way to start is just to kind of remind people of who the lead singer is that we lost from the 90s.
Oh boy, I kind of put that all under WTF.
I know, but I feel like
So we should just say them
we
all.
should just say them all.
Okay, so get
And
ready.
and there was a part. Let's just say who they are. So let's do ladies first.
Oh, okay. Interesting.
And we're just gonna list them first, and then maybe talk about. I don't know. Who
We'll,
knows?
we'll get deeper into it, but I think maybe having the list is a good set the
Yeah,
scene. But then I want to go back to 90s grunge
for
and how
sure.
it started.
Yeah, we
So,
will.
lead singers who died. So, women, we have Kristen Pfaff from Hole,
Mm-hmm.
age 27, heroin overdose. Mia Zapata from The Gits, murdered when she was 27. And then Dolores
O'Riordan.
O'Riordan from the Cranberries. She died at 46, but it was she died drowning, alcohol intoxication. And then the guys, Kurt Cobain, lead singer Nirvana, suicide 27, Lane Staley from Alice in Chains, overdose 34, Bradley Nowell from Sublime, overdose 28, Shannon Hoon, Blind Melon, overdose 28, Michael Hutchins, In Excess, suspected suicide, that has a whole story behind it at the age of 37. Scott Weiland from Stone Temple Pilots and Velvet Revolver, overdose at 48. Janie Lane from Warrant, alcohol poisoning, 47. Doug Hopkins from Gin Blossoms, suicide at 32. Chris Cornell, Soundgarden, and Audio Slave, suicide, 52.
It's quite a list. Just pause there. Like that's
Right.
just very, very sad. And some of these people, obviously, I know very well. Some people I didn't even know their names.
Yes.
But when you sent me the list, I'm like, oh my gosh,
Yeah.
I didn't know the guy from Gin Blossoms died by gunshot,
Mm-hmm.
suicide, died at his own hands. So just really, really sad. And what's cool about this podcast that Cathy and I have cooked up, mostly Cathy, is we're balancing things that we love to talk about, which is pop culture, and something very serious, which is
Yeah.
mental health.
What we want is mental wealth.
Yeah. And mental wellness. So, anyways, so what do
Yeah.
we want to start? Do you want to?
So let's just kind of set the scene for this time period. I think the big turning point was 1991. There was like a massive cultural reset,
Mhm.
which we obviously lived through. You and I were both in college at the time. In September 1991, Nirvana's Nevermind was released. And, in a very, it's not metaphorical, but interestingly, it kicked Michael Jackson's Dangerous off the Billboard
Very
charts.
symbolic,
Very
right?
symbolic. Good. Thank you. That's what I was looking for. And then Pearl Jam's 10 came out in August 1991. And then Soundgarden and Alice in Chains were just getting going. And so, Todd, I'm going to give you a little trivia because
Let's
you
hear it.
always give me the trivia.
Yeah.
Name the five They called them the Big Five grunge bands.
Soundgarden,
Yep.
Nirvana,
Uh-huh.
Pearl Jam.
Correct.
I get the one mixed up with the blah 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 blah. It's not Pumpkins. Pumpkins are not grunge
Nope.
at all.
No.
Um,
They were not on,
no,
they were not in any of my
well, and
research.
that's by design. Alice in Chains,
Yep. Alice in Chains.
and that's I only have four.
Stone Temple Pilots
STP,
is
yeah.
considered the fifth, which was one of my favorites. Like I had a big Stone Temple Pilots period of time. Post college, I did. But anyway, yeah, interesting. So, can you give us a 2 second on why the Pumpkins are not? When you say it's by design, what do you mean?
So I feel like what Eddie Vedder and Kurt Cobain and those types of guys, they were always trying to push against corporate America. And Billy says very clearly, like he always wanted to make it big. He always wanted to sell out stadiums or arenas. Not sure if Pumpkins ever sold out a stadium, but maybe an arena. And
Was it
and
Seattle, Chicago?
well, no, I mean what I do know is the reason the Pumpkins get lumped in is obviously they got big at the same time, and they were in the single soundtrack.
Right.
They were like the last song to be chosen in the single soundtrack, and this is before I think even Siamese Dream came out.
Correct.
And Drown, which is off of I guess.
Gish.
No, Drown is off the soundtrack. It's not on an album.
Okay.
And I think it had to do with the lead singer of Alice in Chains or Soundgarden said to the director who directed it,
Cameron Crowe.
Cameron Crowe said, "You got to listen to these guys from Chicago because they're really good." But Billy just has a completely different stage presence. Like Kurt and Eddie, they're like very normal, salt of the earth type guys. Billy would come in dresses. Like he would wear dresses on
Interesting.
stage. He never wore a flannel. Like it was just very deliberate. So maybe we'll talk about Pumpkins much longer in some other podcast. But Pumpkins are one of my two favorite bands, and they are absolutely not grunge.
So interesting. Yeah, I think we should do a whole thing on Pumpkins in another podcast because that's like Todd said,
Yeah.
he has a lot of info. So let's talk about the bands that were left behind during this big shift, okay? Or the types of music. So hair metal and glam rock, which we are going to do a whole show on because I really love that. So Poison, Warrant, Motley Crue, Rat, Skid Row, Twisted Sister, Whitesnake, all of them got left behind with this whole grunge thing. Grunge was more like about emotional honesty and minimalism. Poison was not about minimalism.
Every has its own.
So it's so easy for me to make fun of Poison and Motley Crue and all these other bands, and I will, so don't worry. And they got some really good songs, but
Of course
including
they
that
do.
one.
And they were of their time, which we will, again, as we said, we will do a whole show on hair bands. And my goal when we do that show is to demonstrate their worth.
Yeah.
Like everyone has a place. The other music that was kicked out of the scene was corporate rock, arena pop, REO Speedwagon, Journey, Styx, Foreigner. Also bands I love. I love that kind of music. That to me is a little more like it kind of vibes with yacht rock a little bit. Yeah, like adjacent to yacht rock.
We're still together.
I think of this as early 80s REO.
Yeah, they had a place. And then another type of music that got kicked out, synth pop, new wave, Duran Duran, Tears for Fears, Aha, Spandau Ballet. They were like not cool anymore. Right. So they, fell out of the mainstream. And because what grunge was not interested in was perfection or image driven marketing, like you said with Billy. They weren't interested in sexist or macho tropes or any kind of escaping. They were like in it.
Yeah.
Todd, they were in it.
Yeah.
They were feeling the pain. And so that was what we were feeling. Like all of that music that I just listed off, all the different kinds of music, that was the 80s, a little bit of it was all kind of mixed together. And then all of a sudden, 91, 92, it became our defining sound. That's what we listened to.
What was the
music.
song that wiped off Smells Like Teen Spirit, wiped off Michael Jackson's? What was the album?
The album was Dangerous.
And what was a popular song on Dangerous?
Remember, I didn't know Dangerous very well. Maybe Black and White?
Okay.
I don't know. I can't, I don't know that
Just
album.
to kind of remind people like the type of music that was being replaced. Right. So all these very different types of music
Yep.
is about to exit stage left and
Correct.
head towards this rainy town in the Pacific Northwest called Seattle.
And speaking of, another way to set the scene here is let's talk about the vibes of the movies. So there was a movie that came out, as we already discussed, Singles, in 1992. And Cameron Crowe was pretty much ahead of the scene when it came to talking about grunge music. I don't even know if we had that language yet, but he, Pearl Jam is actually in the movie. They are in Citizen Dick, the band,
The fake band that was all Pearl Jam members with the exception of Matt Dillon. Yeah.
And so, the music that he put on the soundtrack was, Alice in Chains, Soundgarden, as Todd said, Smashing Pumpkins, even though they weren't.
Was Nirvana on the single soundtrack? I don't think they were.
No. And I think there was like, they were asked and didn't want to be. Don't you remember that story?
I don't know.
Soundgarden, Pearl Jam, Mother Love Bone. By the way, the lead singer of Mother Love Bone also died early.
Andy, I forget his last name. Sorry.
And then Mudhoney, Screaming Trees. So, that's kind of when we start to see the what people were wearing, and I'm not saying Singles invented it. It's just that a lot of flannels, a lot of like less concerned about your appearance. You know what I mean? Because the 80s aesthetic was very like, you guys, my hair was perfect. It was sprayed perfect. It curled. I used curling irons. I used hot rollers. I blew it dry every morning. Like there was a kind of look that needed to be very staged and perfect.
Yeah.
This time during this, it was very sweaty and like not real makeup-y. And so anyway, that was 1992. Do you have anything from that movie that you want to share?
Of Singles?
Yeah.
As a matter of fact, I do. This is Janet and Cliff.
Janet.
What's the ordeal?
Hey. Well, your machine wasn't on, and I was supposed to see you Saturday, but it's done.
Yeah.
So I just thought I'd come by and say hi. Hi. So, how about this weekend?
Oh, this weekend we're really busy. We got that show, right? Yeah, we got that show. We got
Great acting.
Cliff.
We got that show.
Cliff wasn't too into Janet at that point.
Yeah, and Janet plays a very disempowered girlfriend and ends up
until she's not.
Until she's not.
Yeah.
So anyway.
And then kind of switching into another year, 1994, which was I graduated from college in 93. So the movie Reality Bites that came out in 1994 was very much a reflection of what I was feeling and going through. And Todd too. I mean, he graduated a year behind me. So you graduated in 94. Do you remember seeing Reality Bites?
I do. It didn't hit me like it did most people around me.
Okay.
Yeah.
Should
I play a quick clip from that?
Sure, go ahead.
All right.
And can you define irony?
It's when the actual meaning is the complete opposite from the literal meaning. My God.
What's his name?
Troy.
When I needed you to say.
I should go.
Oh, there he goes.
Laney.
Yeah.
Lelena and Troy, and that was Ethan Hawke doing his best Ethan Hawke. He has a persona. Now, let me say this. I have seen so many interviews with Ethan Hawke, and I love him.
Yeah.
He's so down to earth in so many ways, and he's so thoughtful.
Grassroots.
Yeah, but it's just funny. His characters always, not always, but that just reminds me of.
Well, he's kind of like, for me, like Ben Stiller. I love him. And, since he did Severance, he's a completely different person. But
Sure.
I feel like Ben Stiller played the kind of the dopey, disempowered guy in the movie, like Something About Mary, Meet the Parents.
Well, even in Reality Bites, he's not dopey, but he kind of is the guy that gets shoved aside.
And I feel like Ethan Hawke plays a completely different type of person, but similar to other roles that he's played.
Before Sunrise, Before Sunset, Before Midnight.
And even Boyhood. Like I could see like him in Boyhood is an older version of him from Before Sunrise.
Absolutely. Yeah. And maybe that's purposeful,
I don't know.
Well, of course it is, because the same director did the movie. those three movies, and then Boyhood were Richard Linklater, weren't they?
Yeah, Linklater did them
So
all.
maybe he's like, hey,
Yeah,
you're going to
just
be
do the same thing.
Yeah. So Reality Bites, the music in the soundtrack was not necessarily grunge. It was more like grunge adjacent.
Mm-hmm.
So it was a little softer, had some throwbacks like My Sharona and Squeeze, Tempted and stuff like that. But it continued that vibe of like feeling outcast or feeling like overwhelmed by the world, or talking about feelings, like really discussing that emotional core
Yeah.
of grunge, and continuing the look. Like I was just telling Skylar about Reality Bites yesterday, and just like Winona Ryder's hair in that movie, everyone wanted their hair like her.
Yeah.
And what was her hair like? It was just choppy and short and messy.
Mm-hmm.
Like there was no, it was just, and it was adorable, and she's adorable. But we all got our hair cut that way, or some of us did,
Yeah.
including me, trying to do this kind of, it was the same kind of vibe.
Yeah.
And so anything else was set the scene,
Yeah,
honey?
two other things.
Okay.
One is I feel obviously we bought CDs before this, but I feel like I remember going to like Best Buy
Sure.
like every other Saturday buying a CD.
Right.
And it was
Same.
probably one of these artists that we're talking about. Obviously MTV Unplugged played a significant role. Nirvana did it, Pearl Jam did it. And think about the opposite energy of the 80s glam rock
Right.
versus Unplugged. And then
Strip it all down.
yeah, so that's it. So we ready for the Remember When?
Yeah, but I was going to say also, do you remember just going? Yes, we went to Coconut Records, and we went to, not Best Buy. What was the one we always went to? The place where you saw the Pumpkins.
Tower?
Right, Tower Records,
Yeah.
those kind of places in Chicago. And we would just listen.
Mm-hmm.
Because I didn't have any money. I know you probably didn't have much either. And so they had all these earphones set out.
Oh, yeah.
So you could just go listen. I mean, this is before Napster and
Yeah.
being able to download music. So that's how you knew if an album was good. I know they still have these things at
Right.
like Barnes and Noble, but you don't need to
It's not
do
as
that.
necessary.
Yeah, you don't need to do that. So I'm ready for Remember When. Remember when you couldn't wait
To love me,
So
couldn't
what do you-
wait to leave me.
What do you remember about this grunge time, Todd?
I remember, I mean, it was college. It was, we all wore flannels. We all wore
Sure did.
baggy stuff.
Yeah.
Nowadays you go to a college campus, girls are barely wearing any clothes. When you guys were going to college, you were all covered up in 3 layers.
We had sweatshirts, we had our hats backwards.
Yeah.
We had like, it was a lot of jackets and jeans. It was a lot of flannel shirts. Like, to Todd's point, we did not show much
Yep.
at all. Like maybe a blazer with like a semi low cut shirt or like a V-neck, but no, it
Yeah.
was very covered up. But not because of like any kind of, we didn't want to show ourselves.
That was the fashion.
Was the style.
That was the
right?
fashion. What do you remember? Give me one of your.
So my Remember When is, I remember Smells Like Teen Spirit. I remember I came back, it must have been from Thanksgiving or Christmas. I don't remember exactly, but my roommate Hutch, my friend Amy, I remember we came back and she's like, have you heard that song? And I'm like, I totally have heard that song. I knew exactly what she was talking about. And then we went to the SAE house, fraternity house that was across the street from us, and they played it. And it was like the first time I ever danced to that song. And you danced like the video was. And I don't mean because we saw the video. There's just a feeling with that song
Yeah.
where you're just, I don't know if this is a language, but mosh pitting.
Yeah.
You're just jumping
Yeah.
up and down, and there's like a feeling of being really felt.
Yeah.
Like this is where we are. And, and it's funny because, when you think about why these songs were written and the pain that Kurt Cobain was in, obviously me at a small private school in Iowa is not experiencing that, but there's something about the generational pull of like, we know this. And then, so that's the first time Smells Like Teen Spirit came into my life. And then Lithium was actually my favorite song because same kind of thing, same kind of mosh pity dancing to that song. That year, that senior year though, and I knew you at this point, it was really Pearl Jam.
Yeah.
It was 10.
Yeah.
That was the album that I felt like we would play front to back. Does anyone say that anymore?
It doesn't make sense
No,
anymore.
front to back meant
right.
like the front of the album, the back of the album. I mean is you play all the songs, and everybody knew all the songs, and you would go see a band and they would play the songs. And so that was really big for college. And then when post college, that's when Unplugged came out because I lived with three of my best friends from school and we played that all the time.
Yep.
Like we each had our own copy of Nirvana Unplugged. And then that's when I really got into Stone Temple Pilots.
So a few things. One is there was a moment in later 1991. All these albums came in within, I think, like maybe not all of them. Like a few of them came in like within like 2 weeks of each other.
Yeah.
But then others came in like within a few months. Nevermind, September of 91. Red Hot Chili Peppers, Blood Sugar Sex Magic, September, same date.
Wow.
September 24th, 1991. Soundgarden. Bad Motorfinger. I wasn't into that. Pearl Jam 10, August of 91. Guns N' Roses.
Yeah,
Use Your Illusion Part 1 and 2, 91.
So stop on that really quick. Hold your place.
Holding.
What do you think about GNR as far as where they fall? Because they feel like a weird connection between
Yeah, they're the
bands.
bridge.
Yeah, and grunge.
Yeah.
But they were when they came out, I was in high school when they were big, and we knew that was different. Like
Yes. Well,
but
when the main song. The song that changed everything.
Welcome to the Jungle?
No.
Oh, Sweet Child of Mine.
Sweet Child of Mine.
Yeah.
I remember, I think I was a sophomore or junior in high school. And then it was like you couldn't turn the radio on without
Right.
hearing that thing.
Totally.
But I feel like they were the bridge. Having said that, GNR they had what's the name of the album?
The first album?
Yeah, the first one.
Right. I mean, this is a lot of information to remember. Appetite for Destruction. Thank you.
And then they stayed like Use Your Illusion 1 and 2 were like outstanding.
They were.
Double album.
They were.
We also Metallica, the Black Album came out in 91.
Okay.
Some that are less important, Pixies, Trump, Lamond, Matthew Sweet, Girlfriend, My Bloody Valentine.
I loved that album.
And I think U2 came out with one right around that same time. So I don't know.
Which is kind of a mix of music because obviously Matthew Sweet wasn't really grungy.
Exactly.
He was a more like there were other types of music going on in the 90s. That's why I brought up Reality Bites because I think that there was other music that people were listening to besides grunge, but everything had that feel, that dirty, like deep, that sound of the guitar.
Well,
everything was a little fuzzier.
The riff that hooked me into the grunge, I don't remember. I remember I was in the fraternity house and this video came on. Let's And I listened to this song over and over, like in a very annoying way. Like I could not, like, I don't know, there's something about it. And it still remains one of my top 10 Pearl Jam songs. But when
You and David Letterman.
Yeah. So yeah, but Alive was my first introduction to Pearl Jam was much more important to me than Nirvana was, and still is by the way. But anyways.
Few more remember wins before we move on to random facts. This is a sad one, Todd. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
So Todd was a year younger than me, and I went back to visit him. I think it was like our version of homecoming. It was the beginning of the year. And so I had already graduated, and I remember going into Peggy's, which was our bar, and everyone was dancing to No Rain by Blind Melon. And I was like, I knew that song, but I was like, oh, I never did this song here.
Yeah.
Do you know, it was one of my like intros to like, oh, everybody is like bonding over the song and I don't go to school here anymore. And then we didn't have a good weekend. So that song has never been like super, I like it, but it reminds me of that whole weekend.
I hear you, but yeah. when I think of Blind Melon, first of all, thank you for sharing that. Second of all, that bad weekend we had was yet another step into
course.
us coming together.
Of course.
But Blind Melon, I think they only have one album, and Shannon
Shannon died.
died of, I think, a cocaine or heroin overdose. And I love that album. Tones of Home, No Rain, Change.
Your favorite song in the whole world has changed.
My favorite song in the whole world has changed. So yeah, sweet Shannon Hoon from Indiana. Just he had to numb out and escape his pain, unfortunately.
Yeah, and as I said before, my favorite song from that time was the Plush by Stone Temple Pilots, which was, I liked the rock version of it, but I also liked the unplugged version of it. They didn't do MTV Unplugged, but they
There's a
did.
song called Plush.
They did some unplugged shows.
Yeah, and everybody talks about him as like this amazing lyricist. Now, I don't really listen to lyrics that much.
And I feel the time's a ways to go.
Do you think of him as having super good lyrics?
So where
I liked singing their songs, if that makes any sense. I wasn't relating to his lyrics the way I would a Taylor Swift song
Right.
because she's writing about my experience, but they were fun to sing.
Right.
And they kept being good to
Yeah.
me. Like Scott was known for issues with addiction all through
Yeah, he
the
battled.
90s. He did.
Shannon just died.
Right.
And this, what's his name? Scott,
Island.
I think he was trying to get better
sure
through
was.
rehabs and everything else, and just ended up not being able to make it
He
through.
didn't make it. So he died later, more in the 2000s. But anyway, I am ready for random facts if you are.
Let's go to random facts, shall we?
Jerry, do you know the human head weighs 8 pounds?
Jerry, do you know the human head weighs 8 pounds?
Way to play it again. I like it twice.
One more time.
Weighs 8 pounds.
What do you have for random facts, sweetheart?
Well, one of the things you and I discussed as we were talking about the artists who died, the lead singers like Kurt and Kristen, Mia, Shannon, Bradley, Andrew, like all these guys, these lead singers from these bands, they all died at 27.
Yeah.
And there's this like thing with being 27 that is really interesting. And some of the other people who died at 27, Jimi Hendrix, Janis, Jim Morrison.
James Douglas Morrison.
Yeah. And there is like, why, the 27 Club, like why? And I was kind of, doing deep research because, this gets a little into rolling in the deep, which I don't want to jump ahead, but people, it's usually when someone dies at 27, it's addiction, died by suicide, violence of some type. And there really isn't a scientific reason. Like usually they're like, well, this is what happens. Basically, they just attribute it to early burnout, like someone who's been famous who just burns out, their untreated trauma, which we're going to dig into in a little bit, and a culture of enablers. When you have people around you who just allow you to continue doing what you're doing. And then at the time, especially the 90s, there was such a lack of mental health support, so just a very different time. But I just think that's so interesting.
Yeah. A few things I have is very shallow here, but the word grunge was originally used as an insult. Didn't know that.
Oh, interesting.
Maybe that was in a Rolling Stone article. MTV banned Alice in Chains' Wood for drug references. I don't even know that song.
Really?
That's what it says. I mean, everything Cathy and I say could be wrong because we're doing quick searches on the internet, and we all know that the internet is.
It must have been pretty harsh because think about how many songs talk about drugs.
I don't know. Cornell's mom started a foundation for at-risk youth, which is nice. And I don't know if we want to get into Kurt's suicide note, but he did quote Neil Young.
What do you say?
Well, at the very end, I think it says, it's better to burn out than to fade away.
Of course.
But yeah, like a quick dive into his suicide note. His death on April 5th, 1994 was addressed to Boda, Boddah. And Boda was his childhood imaginary friend and reveals a deeply conflicted, emotionally exhausted man. We know that Kurt had a lot of stomach issues, right?
Yeah, he had a lot of he had a lot of chronic pain and illness.
The note combines reflections on his fame, love for music, relationships with fans. So on fame and music, he says, I haven't felt the excitement of listening to as well as creating music along with reading and writing for too many years now. And he also felt guilty for no longer being connected to his audience. He says, I feel guilty beyond words about these things. On his emotional pain, he says, I simply love people too much, so much that it makes me feel too effing sad. And shared the pressure to fake enthusiasm. The worst crime I can think of would be to rip people off by faking it and pretending as if I'm having 100% fun. On his family, he says, Courtney, I love you. Please keep going, for Frances Bean, that was his daughter. And to his daughter, Frances, I'll be at your altar. Please keep going, Courtney, for Frances, for her life, which will be so much happier without me. And then his final line is, it's better to burn out than to fade away.
So many thoughts about that. What's so unfortunate is that in his mind, again, and this is mental illness, right? This is lack of mental health. Yes, it was connected to pain. And I understand that sometimes that in itself can be like, I don't want to be here for that reason, but that's not what his note says.
Yeah.
His note is about the way he felt and thought about himself and the lack of him being able to have the ability to see something else for himself. Like, just something to bring up, is that about a month ago, I don't know if you guys know this, but Tony Hawk's son, Tony Hawk, the skateboarder, his son married Frances Bean.
Oh,
okay.
I didn't know that.
So they had a baby, and Tony Hawk put this post up and basically addressed it to Kurt Cobain and said, I'm with our granddaughter, and I wish you could have been here to meet this baby. And so these guys and women who were so struggling with their own mental health and addiction didn't have the support they needed, which, again, I'm just going to keep saying that. We just didn't have it in the 90s, not the way that we do now. And they could not see beyond the next day.
Yeah.
He probably had a show that night. He probably was being, pushed to do a new album that he didn't want to do. And he's like, since I can't do this, I'm not going to be here. Versus there's many ways that I could go in life. I could choose. Yeah, people would be pissed off and they want, he was a cash cow for them and he was being used by a lot of people, but he's not here.
Yeah.
And, that's just a lot. And the ability for us to now talk about these things, because we didn't really even talk about them. Yes, like what they did after Kurt was found dead, there was this vigil where everybody was sitting around and Courtney read the letter aloud to everybody who was sitting there. And obviously it was broadcast on TV. So we all got to listen to her read it. And she would stop every once in a while and be like, you can F off. And, she was so mad at him. And Courtney, by the way, is Courtney Love. That was his wife. She was the lead singer of Hole. And, the processing of all of it. Yes, we were feeling the pain, but we didn't then talk about as much what comes next.
Yeah.
Like, because this happened, it was just more like, yep,
Yeah.
that's what happened. So there was such an end to it. So a few other random facts. Well, this is a little more of a remember when, but I think I mentioned this on another show, but I remember the day he died, I went to a Samples concert and they sang a song for him, Nothing Lasts for Long. And it was really meaningful to the day of, because we were all dealing with this. It's kind of like anytime an artist dies, depending on what their music meant to you, it can really kind of change your world a little bit. Like, I remember the day I found out Prince died, it really affected me in I was like, whoa, my whole history right before my eyes, right? And being in the middle of this era, being in the 90s with Kurt Cobain, not having him around was, it was altering.
Yeah.
It shook everybody up. And to our, whole show is about, we had one after another of lead singers dying. And so it really shook us up.
Yeah.
So anyway, a few things that I want to say about random facts, and I don't know where to fit all of this in, but I'll say that Mia Zapata, who was the lead singer of the Gits, she actually did not die because of addiction, or she did not die by suicide. She was murdered.
Yeah.
And she was murdered by a man who basically came out of the blue and raped her and strangled her, and she was left for dead. Her friends couldn't find her, and then they found her, and such a sad note, her Walkman was still playing music when they found her.
Awful.
Yeah, it's awful. some things came out of that where that it happened in Seattle, and there was a real awareness that, oh wait, maybe there's some safety things we need to think about, especially when it comes to women. And there was something I think called Home Alone that was, or maybe I can't remember what it was called, but something in her name to be more thoughtful about walking alone and, you know, being people looking after each other, because it was such a grotesque crime, and it to somebody that, you know, the guy who did it didn't know who she was.
The case remained unsolved for nearly a decade, causing distress within the music community. In 2003, DNA evidence led to the arrest of Jesus Mesquia, a Florida man with a history of violence against women. He was convicted in 2004 and sentenced to 36 years in prison. Zapata's death profoundly impacted Seattle's music scene, leading to the formation of Home Alive, a not-for-profit organization dedicated to providing self-defense classes and raising awareness about violence against women. Her legacy endures through her music.
It did bring up some conversation around misogyny, around rape culture, around, you know, it did start a conversation, but obviously we are still continuing to have that conversation. And then one thing that, two very quick things, Sublime, their lead singer, died also. There was after his death, there was a self-titled album that became a breakout hit. I guess they had completed it, and then it became big. And then Dolores from the Cranberries, she had recorded a cover of Zombie the day before she died.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah. So, you know, random facts, they're not very uplifting.
No.
You know, we're going to try and balance this out a little bit, but it was a heavy time. I mean, and that's kind of the thing about grunge. It was heavy. Like, it was almost like it was the beginning of us talking about really difficult things without tools or resolution.
Yep.
Like, it was kind of something exploded where we're like, wait, this doesn't work for me, or I'm in pain, or this is emotional for me. But we didn't know what to do with it. So if you're ready for WTF, I am.
Boy, that escalated quickly. I mean, that really got out of hand fast.
It did.
Jumped up a notch.
It did, didn't it? I messed that up. So this is our WTF. I got a few of them.
Okay.
One is there was a beef between Kurt Cobain and Axl Rose. Did you know that?
No, let's talk about it.
1991, GNR invited Nirvana to open. Let me scroll my screen over. Open for them on tour. Kurt declined, mocking GNR's macho image and Axl's behavior in interviews. Kurt saw Axl as an emblematic of toxic rock star ego, while Axl seemed to resent Nirvana's rising influence and disdain for mainstream rock culture. And then there was the MTV VMAs showdown. Backstage at MTV Video Music Awards, Axl allegedly told Kurt to control Courtney, who had joked about Axl being their daughter's godfather. Kurt sarcastically told Courtney, Axl says I have to shut you up or he's going to beat me up. Axl reportedly threatened Kurt, and Duff McKagan nearly fought and
He's
nearly
from Def
fought Chris.
Leppard.
No, Duff is a GNR guy.
Oh, I thought he was in Def Leppard.
So a little bit of beef between those two guys.
I didn't want to lose this, and I did, and it's kind of going back, but it's better to burn out than fade away.
Yeah.
Was also used by Def Leppard at the beginning of Rock of Ages.
Oh, really?
Do you remember?
No, I don't.
Do you want to pull it up?
Tell me exactly.
It's at the very beginning.
Beginning of what?
Rock of Ages.
Rock of Ages.
And sorry, Duff, that I said you were in Def Leppard when you're in GNR.
Yeah.
I'm sure you're listening.
Let's see if this works.
Or he may not be alive anymore.
Und das Leben laufen loben. Ow. I got something to say. Yeah. It's a birthday. Yeah.
Do we attribute that burnout to fade away to Neil Young? Or I feel like it was part of like my British literature poetry.
It is. It's from a long. I feel like that went way back.
Yeah, I'm gonna find out.
Isn't that the Who?
I said British literature. I was thinking like the 1700s. Not the
Sorry, I'm thinking other artists. Or was it the Stones? There was somebody who was like, or was it the Beatles? There was somebody who said that, and then it's funny because they're still performing now.
No, Neil Young. The phrase "it's better to burn out to fade away" originated from Neil Young's song "My Hey Hey," released in 1979.
Oh, you know what I'm mixing it up with is that the Who has a song I hope I die before I get old.
Hope I die before I get old, talking about my generation.
So different, but same kind of.
So I told you about the beef between Kurt
Yeah.
and Axel. Lane Staley, his body was found with multiple newspapers piled outside. The neighbors assumed he was on a binge, but instead he was actually dead. Not cool. Do you have any WTF moments?
I guess my WTF, it's less of a moment and more like, oh my God, because we've already read to all these people who died, but substance use and mental health were at the core of 98% of these deaths.
Yeah.
I mean, the industry lacked structure to support artists with addiction, depression, and trauma. And grunge and alt rock, they thrived on authenticity, but they also thrived on isolation. It was like we're so, we're in so much pain, and this is such a part of our, experience as artists. They needed men living, Todd.
They did.
And then also the 27 Club myth, all of these artists who have died, it like perpetuated it glamorized early death.
Yeah.
Is like, that's what an artist did. Like, do you remember in the movie Whiplash?
We did a podcast on it, but I still have not yet seen it.
Well, there's a scene where the guy, Miles Teller's, his role in it, there's a part where he is talking about that he wants to be like Charlie Bird. I think I'm saying that right. Forgive me, everybody. But he wants to be like Bird. That's who he wants to be like. He wants to be the best of the best when it comes to jazz. And he's sitting at dinner with his family, and they're like, he died. Like he didn't, like, you maybe don't want to do that. And he's like, no, that's fine with me, as long as I'm the best of the best.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's a very common feeling or it used to be among artists, is that's okay if I die as long as I do something significant.
Yeah. I'm actually pulling it up right now. I just don't know if I can find the right spot where you're talking about it because they're at dinner.
Yes, it's that dinner scene.
Just tell me if I'm close.
They were school buddies, am I right?
Charlie Parker didn't know anybody.
Charlie
until
Parker.
Joe Jonas threw a symbol at his head.
So that's your idea of success, huh?
I think being the greatest musician of the 20th century is anybody's idea of success.
Dying broke and drunk and full of heroin at the age of 34 is not exactly my idea of success.
I'd rather die drunk, broke at 34 and have people at a dinner table talk about me than live to be rich and sober at 90 and nobody remember who I was.
Ah, but your friends will remember you. That's the point.
None of us were friends with Charlie Parker. That's the point.
Travis and Dustin, they have plenty of friends and plenty of purpose.
I'm sure they'll make great school board presidents someday.
Oh, that's what this is all about? You think you're better than us?
Catch on quicker and model you in.
I got a reply for you, Andrew. You think Carleton football's a joke? Come play with us.
4 words you will never hear from the NFL.
Who wants dessert?
And from Lincoln Center?
That's it.
That's intense.
Did I say Charlie Parker or did I say
You
something
said
else?
probably Bird.
Yeah, I think they called him Bird, right?
You're asking the wrong person.
All right. Well, anyway, Charlie Parker. So that is, I think, a very typical mindset of someone who's young.
Yeah.
Because they want to be, and they miss, that's the thing. That's like what the Tony Hawk comment about, we've got a granddaughter here or a grandson, maybe. I can't remember if it was a boy or a girl that they had, but the whole point was there was a whole nother life beyond.
Well, and as we kind of get into the deeper, are you okay with me going to ZPR? Over the WTF?
Yeah, I actually am.
So the next 3 categories are more in the deeper end of the pool.
Yeah, this is Zen parenting kind of stuff.
And we're going to start with this. So, a few things. One is I do a lot of work in the mental wellness aspect of my construction industry, and I listened to this TED Talk, and it was the CEO of Ryan Companies, and it's a guy named Brian. He's the CEO. And one thing I remember from this TED Talk, there's a million TED Talks, and this one was powerful, but this man himself is a CEO of this big GC, big general contractor firm, and he talked about his own battle with suicide ideation. And the one thing I remember from his TED Talk was that he said mental illness is real, it's common, and it's treatable.
That's it.
3 things that we probably didn't grasp in the 90s. It's real, it's really common, and it is treatable. And I just wanted to share that.
Yeah, I think that is that's a perfect way to start because our culture, our generational disillusionment, at least in the 90s, Gen X artists, they rejected all the 80s excess, but then they got into grunge, heroin, and nihilism.
Yeah, right.
You know, like so they were rejecting one thing but going deeper down the hole of thinking this is cool or this is what I do with my pain. You know, I'm using the word cool loosely. I'm not trying to be flippant. I'm just saying that what became cool was this pain, you know, which isn't great. And it was, you know, the pain that they were projecting, it wasn't actually performative. It was like, so like a glam artist, like a hair band would perform a song like a ballad, like how much pain they were in, you know, like Cinderella, don't know what you've got till it's gone. And it's just like, oh, but it was performative.
Yeah.
And this music was not performative. It was real pain. And it was response to our world that felt really broken.
So here's my thing, and this might take us on a detour, but I think it's an important one. First of all, I was in that generation, and of course, pain was real. But if I am my parents' age, I would be like, yeah, in the early 90s, there was a stigma against mental wellness, and there's a stigma against mental health, and there weren't resources available. But resources weren't available for the hundreds of years before that, too. So what made us Gen X people so special to think that we were so special? Every generation that came before us, they didn't have any of these resources.
I mean, the world was changing in so many ways. We weren't of the World War II era. We weren't of the Depression era where you're basically just trying to survive. You know, you're struggling to get by. You're trying to keep your family together. You're trying to stay alive, literally. We as a country, as a whole, were in a lot of global challenges. I know we still are, but it was a time of the culture itself was different. The roles that we had in our families were different. The expectations of men and women were different. And Gen X, like all generations, were a bridge to something new. Things were shifting, things were changing. And how did we feel about that? And what our expectations were? Again, all parents are like, I want my kids to have it better than I did. And that was definitely a huge part of us growing up, right? A lot of my friends' parents did not go to college. You know, they had them right post Vietnam War, you know, right when they were 18. And they're like, okay, you guys are going to go do something different. And the whole thing about women should be able to do whatever they want to do. You know, it's a very 9 to 5 working girl kind of, you know, the Go-Go's are out there, Joan Jett's out there. We're like, yeah, we can do anything. And things were changing fast. Then we bring in Reagan, who everything is about making money, and it becomes a very greedy culture. And everything is about how much money we can make and how preppy we can be and how yuppie we can be. And we started to get very disillusioned. Things were not what they seemed. I mean, that's not that's me just talking off the top of my head. Do you know what I mean?
Well,
I don't really know, but that's my feeling.
Here's my very unfair, critical criticism of my generation. And this is, we're speaking in just expansive, vast generalizations here, but I judge that our kids have more to navigate than I'll use we statements, than we ever did. You know, our kids have to deal with a cell phone. We didn't have to deal with cell phones. That's a huge variable. Our kids had to deal with COVID. You know, in the early 90s, yeah, we had, you know, some small wars, some conflicts happen. I just didn't feel like we had really big, heavy things to worry about.
Well, I think you're looking just externally and you're not thinking internally. And the thing is that regardless of what's going on in humanity, if you're in a war time or not, there's a lot going on inside that has nothing to do with our external experiences. And I think our generation were some of the first to start talking about being molested by somebody that you know, was an authority figure.
Our parents' generation would just push all that down, never bring it up. Right?
And or being hit by your parents, or you know, being raped, or being, all this stuff started to come up and we started to talk about it. But again, we didn't have resources to deal with it. It just laid it was pain.
Yeah.
You know, it just sat there without us knowing or acknowledging, like, we did not, yes, I knew people who went to therapy and therapy was a thing, but it was not a typical thing.
Yeah.
Like, you know, if you remember the movie.
No, it was the exception.
It was the exception. Like, you know, ordinary people, the whole thing of that movie that came out in the early 80s was a kid who his brother died and he went to therapy because he was struggling so much and it was really taboo.
Right.
And so, then all of a sudden in the 90s, we start getting into Goodwill Hunting and, things start to normalize and everything. But it was not, you had the pain, things were coming out, things were exploding. But again, what do you do with it?
Yeah.
And so there was a lot of pressure put on the individual. That is why, for me, what I found in the late 80s, early 90s was self-help. So there was also a self-help explosion, a personal growth explosion. And there was a different kind of spirituality, moving away from religion into being more spiritual. And that's where I found salvation. Like, that's where I was like, this is where I can find a way to look at my own pain. But people, there was just, there was also this how do I say this word? Romanticization? Romanticizing?
You romanticized?
Romanticizing the tortured artist, right? There was also you got a lot of kudos for being a tortured artist. Pain was a creative asset. It wasn't a red flag. It was like, that made you more creative, and addiction was often ignored or encouraged for the art.
Yep.
Like, people didn't want us to, let's go into and this was more like 70s, but on the rewatchables in the 70s, there was a lot of cocaine, right? And there's a lot of drugs. Like, I'm thinking Saturday Night Live kind of time. And then in the 80s and 90s, there was too. There was a lot of drugs. There was a lot of crazy movies. There was a lot of stuff out there, especially heroin. And,
I feel like heroin didn't come around until the 80s and 90s.
Yes, there wasn't
right?
in the 70s. 70s was a lot of cocaine.
Yeah.
But I think it was still around. There was just a lot of drug use. Think about the crack epidemic. We went through so many phases of drugs, and we continue to, they continue. Now we're in a fentanyl phase where we're talking about that. But so part of this problem at this time was that artists who were very tortured, their labels didn't intervene and help them.
No,
it was
they just
part of
wanted to
the
make more
art.
money,
They made money off of it. And so can you see how that then relates to us individually? Maybe we weren't tortured artists. There was just kind of this, you have pain, but I'm not going to do anything about it.
Right.
So I do agree with you that we don't have the cultural explosion as far as so much change in terms of leaders and
Sure.
Or did we? I don't know how much I was paying attention.
No. Our kids these days are more engaged in worldly events than I ever was.
Because of social media.
Sure.
So it's like, I knew who was president, and I remember in college when we went to war. Don't you remember watching Baghdad and everything? I remember it. I just don't know how engaged I was.
Okay.
So let's talk about.
Are we ready for the next one?
No, we're enrolling in the deep still.
Oh, okay, go ahead.
I basically haven't even started, but I won't do a ton because I know we need to keep moving. So let's talk about pain for attention. We're we're in that vibe already. It was about the image of pain and not the healing of pain. It's just another way to say that. It's like, pain becomes stylized. We get stuck in repetition. We're not into emotional growth the way that we are now. We're kind of just, this is who I am.
Yeah.
We are, and when I'm saying we are the artists, again, I'm reiterating why we do this pop culture podcast. What's going on in the culture is a reflection of us. And so our artists were feeling and acting a certain way. And while we weren't having the exact same experiences, it was reflecting what people were feeling. That's why the music meant something to us.
Right.
That's why it was popular. So, expressing real pain, it came from a need to survive. The pain was, it was out there, like it was being demonstrated in the music, but we were not doing anything about it.
Right.
We were just living in it, and it was raw and messy and bad. And it's like, the thing that's happening now, and this kind of borders on parenting, but it's its own thing, is that there is a lot of stuff on social media that is performative pain. Okay. Sure. There's a lot of people who get on social media and they cry and they show their tears and they're and then they get a lot of kudos for that.
Attention seeking device.
It's very attention seeking. But it kind of dumbs down sadness. It anesthetizes it. Is that a word?
Well, if you have to post you crying because you just broke up with your boyfriend or your girlfriend, this is a little judgy, but it seems a little bit less than authentic.
Well, real pain is quiet.
Yeah.
It's like internalized. It's like depression. It's deep thoughts. And performative pain is often very dramatic and external and attention seeking. And so a lot of times this performative pain, I'm not sitting here as a therapist saying you have no pain, you shouldn't share it. But a lot of times it's like, ooh, I had a breakup. I'm going to get online and start crying. That's not real pain.
Most of us from our generation, if we were going to be vulnerable enough to be sad, we would go into our room and not share with anybody. We would get out of Dodge.
And so this blurs the lines a little bit because as a therapist, I'm glad people are expressing pain, but why are they expressing pain? What are they getting from it? This kind of gets really messy and gray. Performative pain gets really rewarded, and real pain, when you're, okay, so performative pain is something that we watch and we go, wow. Real pain is hard to watch. Like when you're with someone who's in real pain, like the kind of, crying that's like guttural. That is not easy to watch or experience. So we're blending these worlds a little bit where, again, I keep saying as a therapist, I have sat with people in real pain over and over and over again, and it does not look like what we're seeing on social media. And it doesn't mean, and then I'm going to speak as someone who wrote a book about teen girls. A lot of girls do this, and it doesn't mean that they are lying. Right. And it doesn't mean now they're over dramatic. It means how are they getting their needs met?
Well, they've probably been supported with their peers because if they see their peers doing it, then they want to do the same thing.
It normalizes that experience. And so, like Kurt Cobain or Lane Staley, they did the music to cope and survive. It wasn't, they were actually like, please don't put me on the cover of Rolling Stone. You know what I mean? They were like, I'm trying to do this. I'm not trying to brand myself. I'm trying to cope. And so again, the music industry often branded that pain. So some artists explore pain as a concept, not a lived experience, but we can feel the difference. Can't you feel the difference?
Of course.
And so again, it's just kind of, that's where I'll go with that. So let's move on to parenting.
All right. Parental guidance.
Be like you. And the cat say, real man. When you're coming home, Dad.
So my only thing about this, thing that I thought is most worth sharing, which is what we've been talking about at Zen Parenting for 15 years, is that asking for help equals strength.
Amen.
And we weren't taught that growing up. You got to hide that stuff. You got to bury that, just bury it somewhere in your body. And I think our kids are good at not doing that.
I think our kids have more permission to share that pain and then really know they can access resources. And for us as Gen Xers who maybe come from the tortured artist, deal with your pain, repress it, do what you have to do, have a shot of bourbon, have your 10 glasses of wine, that isn't good in the long run. There's no way to grow from that. That keeps you stuck.
And the other parental guidance one I have is that celebrity doesn't equal happiness.
I have that as well. Like I actually have fame does not equal health and talent does not equal invincibility. In my college class with my college students, so many of them over the past 13 years, we talk about what they want, and there's always this desire for fame. And a lot of it is social media fame and influencer fame and that kind of thing. But we talk about how so many people who get that fame are not happy, and how so many of them do die by suicide or they end up in rehab over and over again. Again, I've been teaching at this college so long. I used to talk about Justin Bieber, how sad he was, the way Michael Jackson died, the way all of these artists that we're talking about today from the 90s, it was all addiction and depression. And so, we have to be able to manage our talent and to recognize what being happy really means. And when I say manage, what I mean is have a wider perspective that our talent, we are not like overwhelmed by it, that we get to choose where we use it and when we use it and how we use it.
Well, I've shared when you and I are doing parenting presentations, I sometimes lead with say, what do you want for your kids? And everybody's always like, I want happiness. And where I always come to is we want wholeness, which means creating space and acceptance for the happy emotions and also the ones that are less comfortable, like anger, fear, and sadness. Like, I don't want my kids to be happy because that means that that's the only thing you're shooting for. I want to be able to give them the ability to express any emotion that's coming up in a responsible, conscious way.
Yeah, like what our generation has been able to do, talk about bridging the gap between the boomers and millennials and Gen Z, is I think Gen X has been able to talk about and normalize emotions and recognize that or start that conversation. Now Gen Z is excellent at it, that all these emotions are fine.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sad, or yeah, I'm stressed, or yeah, I'm overwhelmed, and that's not me. I am not anxiety. I am feeling anxious. You know,
Right.
there's a whole, and some people, again, you know, who get diagnosed with these things, sometimes it's more extreme, but that's when they get help.
Sure.
So I think so again, reiterating what you say, as far as parenting goes, and what we've learned from these experiences from the 90s is that, you know, expressing sadness is strength, just like you said, and that asking for help is necessary. And as parents, to not impose this thing on our kids that they should be suffering in silence.
Oh.
And that we show up wherever they are and say, we will help you. And last, Todd and I were talking about one of our favorite scenes from a movie that it's a parenting scene from the movie This Is 40.
Oh, yeah.
Where Paul Rudd is married to Leslie Mann, and Leslie Mann and her daughters are listening to, like, I think it's a Nicki song, and he's like, no, you got to listen to this song.
Why'd you take it off?
Now something that really rocks. Send me pictures. This is called Good Music of My Heart. From somebody's heart.
Bumming me out. It's fun.
Just listen to these words, okay? Just listen to the words. Got my pills against death.
I don't understand the word.
This is lyrics. This is poetry. This is what is going to survive in 100 years.
It just doesn't make people happy.
Makes me happy. I can dance to it.
My God, I am so.
You are so Paul.
Well, my version of that is I used to force my kids to listen to "Shine On You Crazy Diamond" in the car, which is a Pink Floyd song that I think is like 14 or 15 minutes long, and like they don't even start singing any words until like 6 minutes in. And so I am Paul Rudd, just so you know.
And that is Rooster by Soundgarden. So is Soundgarden
Alice in Chains.
Alice in Chains. I'm sorry, Alice in Chains. So anyway, we could move to what did we learn?
All right. So what did this teach us, sweetheart?
Well, the tortured artist myth, it's deadly.
Yeah.
I mean, this whole idea of I'm going to be this tortured artist, if it be, I feel like in the 90s, it was glaring that it was musicians, but we've done this in history as far as writers who are tortured, you know, this whole idea of that we need to be in a lot of pain to have good art. And that is not true. We can have great art come through our pain, but as a post-traumatic growth versus constantly being stuck in that pain.
What I have is unprocessed pain or grief becomes addiction, rage, or isolation.
Yeah.
I also have emotional education isn't optional, it's survival.
Mm-hmm.
You and I have spoken a lot about that.
We've put our whole career on that.
We sure did. Here's my question, unanswerable question, but I want your 2 cents.
Yeah.
Do you think that artists are better equipped to write really deeply impactful music when they are in pain versus when they are happy?
I think that it is more, let's just talk about this from an emotional, like psychological level. When we are in pain, think back to when you are a lot more vulnerable and open. You're less worried about what other people think. You're more open to new possibilities rather than trying to stay stuck in a system that's not working for you. And I know that I have written some wonderful things when I'm in the most pain because I don't care.
Yeah.
I'm like, this is going to be from my heart. I am not going to try and rationalize this for this person. This is how I feel now. So it's not about that. We can still know that we can have utilize that vulnerability that we're feeling, that pain that we're feeling, to have great art come out. But I think the key is then we move on.
Yeah.
Then we may have pain again, and then that's how we process it. I mean, this is what all artists do now. I mean, it's this very Taylor Swiftish conversation. I'm only using her. Everybody does it. Olivia Rodrigo does it. Gracie Abrams does it. Sabrina Carpenter. Well, she's more like funny about it, but they also have songs that are really fun and uplifting and heart-centered that have nothing to do with their pain, but about being in love.
So
That's also a vulnerable time.
So if I box you into a corner and say yes or no, the question is most of this art, musical art that we appreciate, come from pain or joy?
Pain.
For sure.
Mm-hmm.
Does that mean we're better equipped to deliver creativity from pain versus joy?
It means that sometimes some of the great work comes from pain.
Yeah.
And some of the things that we love the most, but it doesn't have to be like, I'm thinking about American Pie. Okay. This, Don McLean song. That is about a sadness. That is about a loss of, the plane that went down, that had some of our best artists, in the plane. And Don McLean was devastated by that. And he talked about our country, and he talked about loss. And it wasn't like he was a tortured artist.
We were singing about it's American Pie. Drove my Chevy to the levee.
He processed his feelings about that loss through the song.
Yeah.
But he's not like, so therefore I'm a depressed person.
Right.
It's because I'm going to go back to what you said before under parenting lens. Our kids are going to have sad times, hard times, anxious times, whatever, and they don't need to create them or manufacture them. They're just going to happen.
Of course.
So what can you do during that time? Like, one of the best things you can do is journal.
Yeah.
If you're not a journaler, if you like to write lyrics, write lyrics. If you like to write screenplays, write screenplays. And you work that through, and then you can do the other parts of it, the performing of it, the creation of it, with more joy.
Yeah.
But the idea that all of your work is going to come from this stuck, sad, painful place, I question that.
Yeah.
Like, that's not necessarily, it's just a moment in time.
What else? Do you have anything else for what did it teach us?
I mean, the final thing is that the music industry, or any industry, it needs to have, they have to evolve and have better support systems.
Yeah.
We can't Matthew Perry just died last year, and it's because all of these enablers, all these people around him that worked for him were like, yeah, I'll give you a shot. And there was a bunch of doctors who took advantage of him and who were like, yeah, I'll sell you ketamine. Like, we have to have better support systems for these people. And when I say that, it's such a huge generalization, because every individual with money gets to choose, who am I going to have on my team?
Yeah.
But as far as an industry goes, the whole idea of in the 90s that they, cashed in on the pain of these artists, I think that has had its time, and we're beyond it.
You ready for Cringe or Classic?
I'm ready.
Nobody puts baby in a corner.
And I mean nobody. So here are a few Cringe or Classics I have, and they may be controversial.
Okay.
But I'm going to just start. Well, I'll start easy. Flannel overload, just the whole flannel thing.
A lot of flannel.
Cringy or classic?
I loved it. I still have my flannel, not the ones from you've been wearing a flannel every day for like
because
the
it's
last.
purple.
Yes, I know. Keep going.
The myth of the tortured genius, cringe
Yeah,
or classic?
Cringe.
And then lastly, this is the controversial one, Smells Like Teen Spirit.
Oh, classic.
A little overplayed.
Oh, but it's a classic.
I know.
Yeah.
I would never categorize it as cringy, but it's one of those songs I have listened to too many times.
Sure.
To really appreciate. What do you have?
Well, it's the music. It's the honesty of the music is classic. It's my generation of post-college and post-college. So it means a lot to me for all of those deep reasons. It's timeless music. The cringe is how the industry ignored the red flags.
Right.
That's what's cringe to me. They glorified addiction, sold out. Tragedy is like a brand.
Yep.
So.
Are we ready for what's next?
Yes, for music game.
Music game.
Oh, no. Or is it who came?
Best quote? Let's say music game to the end.
There's a few we have left, and we'll do them quickly. Where are they now?
What about best quote?
Okay, I'm ready for best quote.
May the force be with you.
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 May the force be with you. What do you have for best quote?
I actually have two.
Okay.
I have a Kurt Cobain quote: "I'd rather be hated for who I am than loved for who I am not," which is a super Gen X rejection of performance and conformity.
Yeah.
I think that's a big part of what I talk about with parenting is, let's let our kids be who they are, like instead of trying to be performative. And then, of course, sweetie, we're huge in Belgium. It's one of my favorite Gen X
is it
quotes.
because I say that to you all the time? I feel like I may have screwed up the country. Is it?
It's Cliff from Citizen Dick says we're huge.
When in
Belgium.
fact nobody knows who they are in Belgium.
No.
And barely anybody in Seattle knows who they are.
Todd and I say that sometimes because Zen Parenting Radio
Is huge in Belgium.
Zen Pop Parenting now, we are sometimes number one in other smaller countries. And so we're always like, we're huge in this small country.
That's right.
Which we love and appreciate. We're not making fun of it, but it's like Cliff says he's huge in Belgium, and is he?
Yeah.
So those are mine. What do you?
Mine is it's a lyric from a song by Pearl Jam. You probably know what it's going to be, sweetie. And
Okay.
I don't even know if I have it queued up right, but here we go. I know someday you'll have a beautiful life. I know you'll be a star in someone else's sky, but why can't it be mine? It's just like heart-wrenching.
Yeah.
Love it.
Yeah,
Love
it's
it
a
so
great
much.
love
Thank you,
lyric.
Eddie. And then there is, if you ever want to YouTube Dave Letterman Black, because that's from the song called Black off of 10, Dave, Dave is just singing it like night after night, just that part, do 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 do. And then finally, after weeks, Eddie comes in, sings that one song, and walks off stage. It's just really poetic. Love
Yeah.
it. Okay, are we ready for Where Are They Now?
Where are they now?
Where are you now? Where are you now that I need you?
I don't really know where to go with this. Where do you want to go?
I went really simplistic because there's so many people from the 90s and it's boring to go
Yeah.
through it all. I just did the real basics. I did David Grohl
Yeah.
coming out of Nirvana, creating the Foo Fighters. He had some difficulty a couple of years ago.
Marital
issues, but Foo Fighters continue even after Taylor Hawkins, their drummer, died.
Yeah.
But the Cranberries released a album in 2019 using Dolores's final vocals.
Mm-hmm.
So there was an album that came out. Soundgarden briefly reunited before Chris Cornell's death. So we had another moment with them. Shirley Manson from Garbage. We didn't really talk about the band Garbage, but I really liked them in the 90s. I think they're kind of still on the verge of grunge at that time. Maybe they were more grunge adjacent, but they're still out there. She's still performing, and she's amazing. And then the organization that you talked about with Mia Zapata, called Home Alive, they've helped thousands of people rethink safety and consent and empowerment through activism. So that's really made an impact.
A few things I'll share is you and I went to see Pearl Jam. Was it this last summer?
Yeah, it was so good.
So
At
they're all
Wrigley.
still together. I think they switched drummers 3 or 4 times, but the 4 guys, Stone, Jeff, Eddie, and God, I forgot the 4th one. I'm sorry. They're still together. They're crushing it. They're still putting out good music.
They are so good.
Yeah.
Like Todd, I mean, we've seen Pearl Jam several times, but at this show, I didn't know all the music because I definitely had gaps in my Pearl Jam, archive.
Yep.
Like I missed, albums, and it was still amazing. Like most of it I knew, but the songs I didn't, I was like, this is still great. And just the fact that first of all, just as a big moment to say that Eddie Vedder is the only surviving lead singer of the Big Five.
Right.
That's pretty significant.
It's crazy.
Of the Big Five grunge bands, he is the only surviving lead singer, and they continue to tour, as you said.
Yep. Okay. So now is it music game?
I think it is.
And will you, do I?
The one that makes me go all night long.
Explain what the music game
The
is.
music game is a game that Todd and I and our friends Chris and Manisha came up with, where we choose a topic and then we decide what song matches that vibe of that topic the most. As I say every week, it's not supposed to be the most obvious song. It's supposed to be the song that is it's something that means something to us personally, so we can defend why we chose this song to match the vibe. So this is tough,
Yeah.
because we're talking about all this 90s music. And we have to choose one song.
Yeah. You want me to go first, or do you
It's
want
up to you. Yeah, go ahead.
I guess I'll go first. Not sure if this is my best entry, but I'm going to do it anyways,
Okay.
and then I'll explain.
Take me all the way. Yeah. Yeah. There is nobody out there. Hard to believe that I'm all alone.
I think
But
that's
just for that
excellent.
line, right?
It's excellent. I
Yeah.
love it. Good for you.
Because it's Chili Peppers. We didn't really talk much about them because they're like an 80s band and a 90s and a 2000s and a 2000s.
They somehow match that grunge vibe, though. They really do.
And that song is, oh, I feel like there's certain songs that just feel sadness.
So sad.
And this is one, and I don't know if it has to do with it's probably the music, not so much the words. But anyways,
It was
Under the
going
Bridge.
through my first very big breakup when that song was popular, and that song broke my heart.
Mm,
And if you listen to the words, it didn't relate to me
Right.
as a girl, but I got it.
Yeah.
I was like, ooh, this song makes me sad.
what do you got, babe?
So I'm going to surprise you because this is kind of obvious.
Okay.
Usually I tend to go really obscure
Yep.
and try and be interesting, but I chose Alive by Pearl Jam.
Oh, wow.
I really did a lot of thinking. I thought about it for a whole week, Todd. And the whole idea of this song being about family secrets and identity and emotional confusion. I mean, this song is intense. Like, not only is it about him recognizing his father isn't his father, but there's also an incestuous thing that happens in the second verse.
Yeah.
And they say that as Pearl Jam always does, read it for what you think it is.
Right.
All along, baby, sir. You're
So that line right there.
Yeah.
Sorry you didn't see him, but I'm glad we talked.
Yeah.
Like, end of story. And this whole thing that Eddie Vedder has experienced with his father, it is still a part of his music.
Yeah.
Like, it has impacted every aspect of his life.
Mm.
And then the song was also written by Stone Gossard. And so that the whole thing about, the verse of someone walking in, she walked in and,
Mhm.
that verse.
Yeah.
Walks into a young man's room, and it's like, what happened to these boys?
Yeah.
Were they molested? Was it a parent?
Yeah.
What, like these things. And the song doesn't, I mean, he says, I'm still alive,
Yeah.
but it hasn't been resolved.
Yeah.
And so I feel like it just contains exactly what the 90s are about.
Yeah.
As far as music.
I'm a little unprepared for the trivia, but I'll try my best anyway.
Okay, let's do it.
Sweetie, what was the debut album of the Stone Temple Pilots?
God, I know. Oh, it wasn't Plush, was it?
It was not. I think it was called Core.
It was. You're right, Core.
Which James Bond film featured a theme song sung by Chris Cornell? Which James Bond film?
I have no idea.
Casino Royale.
Oh, interesting.
What was Cranberries' most iconic protest song?
It was Zombies.
That's very good. Take a guess. What year was Kurt Cobain born?
Well, I'm going to say 1968.
67, close enough. I'll give you a point. Scott Weiland also fronted which supergroup with members of GNR?
Velvet Revolver.
Very good. Cornell formed the supergroup Audio Slave with members of which band? I don't know if this is correct. I was a little scared doing trivia.
Temple of the Dog.
We didn't even talk about that.
And explain to me Temple of the Dog, because it's Eddie Vedder.
It was
Chris Cornelison.
Yeah.
Or Chris Cornelison. Chris Cornell.
It was an album. I think it was like a mini album where they wrote 2 or 3 songs, and it was to honor Andy, I forget his last name, the guy who passed away from Mother Love Bone.
Oh, see, it brings it all back. I should have chosen I'm Going Hungry.
I'm going hungry.
Because that would have been.
I thought about using that as my song.
Because they are singing a song.
Yeah.
These guys get together. They sing a song about a guy who died.
Yeah.
And then one of those guys also dies.
Yeah.
Gosh, makes me want to just go over that song. And
I don't mind stealing bread from the mouths of decadence. But I can't pick on the power.
But we're not going to close that this podcast with that song, even though I love that song. Any parting thoughts before I close us out?
I think that was a really thorough. I mean, obviously, there's so many other things to talk about, but I really enjoyed that. Thank you very much.
I'm going to close with a Cranberries song called Dreams. When Dolores died, it just kind of punched me in the gut. We actually talked about it on Zen Parenting podcast one time, and I just love Dolores, and I feel bad that she had to numb out to alcohol. And this is one of my favorite Cranberry songs. See you next week, everybody.
Every bus is